Mary, how's it going? Thanks for joining me on the Love and Courage podcast.
Thanks, Rory. It's great to be here. And thanks for asking me.
I feel like I'd love to be sitting down, sharing that cup of tea. Well, not sharing your cup of tea. I'd have my own cup of tea, obviously, but it would be nice to be in person. Can you describe the part of the world that you're in now, and for those that are looking in or listening, what it's like in the world around you at the moment?
Well, it's one of those really beautiful days in May. I'm in Wexford. It's where I grew up, but I'm currently building a house brick by brick, block by block on my land. So I'm in a rented house that we've been in for a while, and it's a beautiful day, but it really needs to rain. It hasn't rained properly in ages, so I was just out with my vegetable garden, and it's struggling. Everything's struggling because just below the surface there was a little bit of water a few days ago, wasn't it? Last week there was a storm, but it's just, if you go down a little bit at all, it's just dry dust for a long way down. We really need it to rain now.
Do you think we don't appreciate the rain that we have enough in Ireland sometimes?
I love rains. I never understand the problem with rain. Yeah, I think it's the best thing ever. We're so lucky.
Isn't that the thing, like, that we kind of champion ourselves as this green place, but the thing that makes us green is inevitably rain. Like, yeah.
Sometimes in the west of Ireland, it reminds me of like Atlantis or something.
Yeah.
All the land is streaming. The way everything is streaming with water, and people give out about it. But I just think it's pure magic. There's life everywhere.
Yeah, my wife and I spent a summer in San Francisco, and I remember just being around Northern California, which typically isn't the most sort of driest part of California. Obviously Southern California would be, but the land had just turned brown and it'd been so parched. And I remember thinking, like, to be in California, and even more recently I was in New York, but like growing up, these were the utopian places that an Irish teenager, or certainly I did, you'd want to be. These are the places of the movies and lots of excitement and everything. But when I see like just that sort of like scarcity of, water, I suppose what I'm getting at here is that water is life, isn't it?
Yeah, simple as that. Yeah. We have an abundance of it.
Yeah.
Which is a bit odd, because actually Ireland nature has collapsed in Ireland. The ecosystems have mostly collapsed here, so it looks green, but it's actually quite a green desert at this stage.
Yeah, I did hear you say that before, and it struck a chord. And where I'm speaking to you from right now in the west coast of Clare, certainly it's beautiful from one perspective, and if you kind of flick that perspective, sometimes I see it as completely barren and desolate, but it's almost like a memory that I don't have, or a memory of what could be or what should be,
Yeah.
And I think sometimes there's a consciousness that's there that has been eroded or stolen, that the idea that trees can't grow here, for instance, and then 3 miles in the road there's plenty of trees magically.
Yeah, it's sheep that are growing instead of trees, or deer. That's the problem. It's just like there's quite a number of issues with lack of trees. They got cut down when the English were here, but it was a long time ago. We haven't really let any more grow since then.
Yeah. Do you think we overly cooked that one, that we sort of blame colonialism for everything, and much of it rightfully so, but particularly trees, like the English have been gone for a while now, from certainly most of the island anyway, that there's nothing to stop us getting on with things a little bit.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it now. But yeah, totally. It was when you we're a forest people without a forest. I hear a guy called Andrew St. Ledger, who's this font of information. He has a thing called the Woodland Trust, or the Woodland League.
League, yeah.
Yeah, himself and Ted Cook, and they're amazing. But I love when they say that, because that's what we are. We're forest people without a forest. And when you take the trees away from people, you take away their power. Very interesting kind of so that was what the English were doing at the time of colonialism. But we never restored our own power. So it's up to us now. We can't blame anyone anymore. It's up to us to fix it, because like Extinction Rebellion say, like, we're the leaders we've been waiting for. You know, we have to do the work. So it's up to us.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you see that the absence of trees, and I think it's well documented, we're one of the least forested countries in Europe, if not I think second to Malta or something like that. But you see a direct correlation between the lack of power emerging from the land and the lack of power within the psyche of the Irish people to some extent.
Yeah, I think we're basically like the old ways in Ireland and all across the world. It was understood that people were simply mirrors, reflections of the health of the land. So a very obvious example of that would be like the lack of diversity, the lack of you know, diverse communities of plants and animals, and you know, all the other creatures that we're supposed to share the planet with. The lack of that diversity is very obviously reflected in our lack of diversity now. There's, you know, and I don't mean that from a racial point of view. I mean it from a, you know, I mean, just everybody has the same kind of dreams, the same kind of day. You know, everything is very, very repetitive a lot of the time. If, you know, not everyone is lucky enough to have the same kind of day, but you see kids, they all dress exactly the same, which is often the case. But you know, there's a lack of kind of health in us that's reflected in the lack of health in the soil. And yeah, I mean, we can restore health and abundance very easily, and it would just take a little bit of political will, and I think that's coming, you know, because they have to follow, because we're all kind of leading them, really, you know, at the end of the day. We just need to get a bit louder.
Yeah, I hear that. And so you, as somebody that is not afraid to be, let's say, louder, where in your life has that come from? And when you say you grew up in that particular part of Ireland, then in Wexford, like, what were the early origin stories of you, sort of the seeds of being vocal and conscious of these issues?
Well, I grew up on a farm in Wexford, youngest of 6 kids, parents both farmers, but also worked full time. So I had a lot of freedom to kind of wander around in the way we used to when we were young. And I suppose I kind of made my connections with nature as opposed to with people. So I feel very strongly that my tribe is a green tribe almost, really. It's I don't really have a huge amount of people connections, but I do feel very much at home in nature and feel very close to that world. So I suppose I kind of have noticed over the years, and you know, I go in and out of it because, like everybody else, you kind of get diverted by, you know, teenage years and parties and all that stuff, fun stuff, and then you find your way back, I guess, to who you are, and that can take a whole lifetime. And like everybody, I'm still working at it, but I feel very strongly that we are at a very dangerous crossroads, and there's a lot of tipping points coming towards us, and we need to remember who we are and to start taking care of this planet again, because in the whole of the ecosystem, every single creature that lives here, from every piece of grass to every insect to every mammal, they all have a very important role to play in the web of life. They're all connected, interconnected, interdependent, and we have no role in there. We're hopelessly dependent upon their health in order for us to survive. So our only role the only thing that makes sense to me is one of guardianship. And all the old myths in Ireland talked about that, about sovereignty of the land and how we need to give sovereignty back to the land, give the land its freedom back so that she can decide what she wants to become in order for her to be able to be abundant and take care of us and all of our other creatures. But if we take too much and we don't look after her, it becomes the wasteland. And that's what we're living with now, unfortunately. But we can fix it.
Yeah, so I guess there's a real mythological arc to this idea of the wasteland, and I suppose you ended that by saying that we can fix it, and I suppose can suggest the possibility, the opportunity, and the choice. Where do you see that kind of conscious agency at play in people's lives, or how do you think people can become present to it?
Well, I think there's a very strong disconnection from the world of nature, from our world, from our place in the world. And I think if you reconnect people into nature, they automatically become warriors for nature's green army in a way. You know, they suddenly notice, you know, because there's that concept called shifting baseline syndrome, Ruairí. Do you know what that is?
Yeah. Do you want to explain it though for anyone watching or listening?
Yeah. So shifting baseline syndrome is basically, it's a term, I can't remember who came up with it now. Sorry, apologies to the person who did, but it's basically the concept that every generation has a different concept of what is natural.
Yeah.
And so we look at, you know, you look at the bare hills of Clare, which, you know, we're told are beautiful, and you see it in all the Irish tourist ads, these lovely, beautiful rolling hills. But you have that instinctual awareness within yourself that there's something wrong, you know, and that's because those hills used to be covered with trees. And, you know, the sky used to go black with birds going overhead, flocks of birds, or, you know, that swarms of butterflies would block out the sun for a moment, or, you know, that the seas used to be crystal clear because of the beds of oysters beneath, you know, and the rivers used to be crystal clear and hopping with fish and hopping with dragonflies and kingfishers. And now it's silent. This is what the problem is. It's silent. Everything is. If we see a butterfly, like, my heart leaps with joy just to see one, and that's shifting baseline syndrome, because my kids don't know any different. You know, only that I tell them, but they don't want to be hearing it either, you know. Yeah. Sorry, I talk a lot, don't I?
Well, I think that's the point of this, Mary. Talking is good. Talking is good.
Yeah.
I just, you're describing your childhood there, and somebody that was made friends with the natural world, if you like. Would you have been someone that people may have described as away with the fairies in whatever way they might have meant that?
I suppose there would have been a lot of that. There still is.
Yeah, and because it's not necessarily a bad thing in my eyes, anyway. That this notion that you're away with the fairies can be, for me anyway, it could be you're away in a dream time, or a parallel course to what can sometimes be a destructive course, like you alluded to, this idea of a monoculture of consumption, or what's perceived to be progress, which could be destruction. But somebody that is away from that, quite often there's a kind of derogatory ideas that we dismiss them as being dreamers, or not getting with the program. But what if we don't want to get with the program? You know,
it's important to break the program, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's important for everyone to step outside of the system we've created for ourselves, and to reimagine this world into an abundant, beautiful, simple, gentle life again, you know. That's important.
I'd imagine that school wasn't necessarily the most fun place for you, or maybe it was, but I mean, how did you navigate the kind of curriculum driven system?
Well, weirdly, I was really clever, but not and I never did any work, so I'm not clever anymore. My brain seems to have stopped working.
Right.
But no, I used to be able to remember stuff really well from the night before, studying, cramming, and that was how I got through college and school. But I didn't actually learn anything, you know.
Yeah, I suppose that's how you have to sort of maybe separate what learning and education are, or the memory system and so on. And what did you ultimately, you mentioned going to college, what did you end up doing at college? Or
well, I started off doing languages and marketing in Wexford, and then I dropped out of that after drinking. I drank my way out of that pretty quickly, and then I fancied a guy doing landscape design and so I did a degree in agriculture.
Okay.
Sort of specializing in landscape design. So I think that only lasted about 2 weeks, and then I was there for the next 5 years. So, but I did it anyway.
So do we have this guy to thank for a lot of the good work that's gone on? This fella that you fancied?
Mick.
Good man, Mick.
Mick.
Big shout out to Mick.
He's a great guy. Still know him very well.
Great.
But no, he's yeah, I think I would have found my way here anyway, you know.
Yeah.
So
do you kind of subscribe to ideas of vocation and dharma and people having an innate path that they're meant to be on to some degree? Or do you feel like you carve your own path? It's
I think whatever you believe is whatever you live. So I don't have any beliefs that I think anybody else should have. I think whatever I believe is my life, and that's it. And everybody has different ways of looking at life. So I certainly don't purport to know anything, you know. I just know that we are at a crossroads, that we need to, you know, I used to be a garden designer, you know, and I kind of gradually gave that up. And I've come to this point now where I realize this is different, you know, this is different. We're running out of time. Everything has to change. And I do think that if we can empower people enough, like you said, you know, how do you wake people up? If you can empower people, because I think a lot of people feel powerless, Rory, you know, and when you feel powerless, then you just go and look at the telly or something, you know, go for a pint, don't think about it, just, you know, because there's nothing you can do anyway. So that seems to be, so that's what I decided to try and work on, was to try and empower people to do something, to make a change themselves.
And so is that's become your kind of life's work at the moment? I mean, I get the sense that you don't particularly want to talk about your past life. Is that true? I mean, that's just a feeling that I have at the moment, is that if I ask you about garden design, you're going to be like, just skip to the next bit.
No, I don't really know. I mean, I know that my parents both died a couple of years ago, and so I find, yeah, looking back is a bit rough at the moment. But in terms of garden design stuff, no, I don't mind talking about it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the time for gardens is gone, you know. And it's my dog trying to break into the room.
Dog is welcome on screen.
I'm gonna have to bring the dog though.
Sorry. Yeah, sure, why not?
Sorry, apologies.
This is an animal-friendly podcast, so apologies to anyone in the audio version that won't necessarily get to see the dog.
Dog is not coming up anyway. She's here though.
Okay, so it's good to introduce a bit of chaos into the mix as well.
What were we talking about?
You were talking about looking back.
Oh yeah.
That it's difficult for you, you know, particularly having lost your parents, and there seems to be a juncture there.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, no, I just feel that. No, I just realized that gardens are kind of done. You know, for a long time we created gardens to create a safe place from nature, because it was full of wild creatures that would happily eat us, because, you know, we're just part of dinner like any other wild creature is. When they're hungry, they, you know, or whatever. It's just, and we had to create these parklands for growing food, and you know, we ended up starting this farming system, which really was, you know, the beginning of the end in many ways, you know. So I do feel that we've come full circle to a point now where we actually have to do the opposite. We have to embrace nature. We have to bring it inside all those little walls we've created. We have to give as much land as we can back to nature. We've taken far too much. It's time to restore. So my feeling now, after what 20 odd years of being a garden designer, is that actually the time for gardens is gone. And I know I'm saying to a huge, massive industry. I mean, the amount, I mean, gardens use 10 times more chemicals per acre than farming does, you know. gardening is a massive multinational industry at this stage. And I'm standing here, you know, on my own saying that has to stop. Gardens have to stop. Unless you're growing your own food, give your land back to nature, because it's a really powerful thing to do. And the speed that nature recovers is so enchanting and hopeful that it really inspires people to do more, because they feel like they've done something really important, whether it's just a window box or a large piece of land. So yeah, I do think gardens are done. This idea of looking at gardens as some kind of a blank canvas for our artistic expressions is wrong. I just am very, very passionate about that. I have a very strong feeling that they have to stop. Yeah, so it's a big change for people to take on board, you know, because they love this idea of having this piece of land that they can make into this pretty space, and you know, only what they decide gets planted in there, and their idea of beauty gets created in there. And it really appeals to our sense of control, because people feel a certain amount of peace when they have everything under control. But that's a very masculine piece, and there's a very strong feminine piece that comes with letting everything go and letting it be wild and true and natural, and allowing its true beauty to emerge. I'm going to stop talking now. Let you talk for a little while.
So it strikes me that this could be done in a very conscious way, in a way that could almost be therapeutic to people that are perhaps even that feel a sense of disease or something that is not right in their lives, or with their lives in this world as we know it, which God knows is very much out of line at the moment, or out of tune. But if we wanted to kind of work our way through that, we could almost embrace rewilding as part of rewilding ourselves, so that it could be done in parallel.
Well, my understanding of land is that the earth is like a big heart, okay? And when we started looking at the earth in terms of ownership instead of in terms of guardianship, the earth kind of shattered, the heart shattered into all these tiny pieces, which we now claim to own. And what came with that is a really sort of unusual relationship, because there's boundaries on those little pieces of heart, which we call our gardens or our land. And within those boundaries, that body of land has its own trauma, its own personality, its own spirit. I don't understand it, I just can feel it, that's all. But we have a huge opportunity if you work to rewild that piece of land, to turn it into an ark, to restore its full health as much as you can. It's like you're giving attention to the parts of your life that reflect the losses within the land, because there's something very unusual about the land that finds us, or we find. It has the very same levels of damage or types of damage that we have ourselves. So for example, my own field, my own land, clearly has very strong, and this is just instinctual and kind of listening to land, it has major problems with abandonment and what's the word, rejection. So I'm the same in my life. They're always the things that I've had problems with, and I've ended up with a piece of land that has exactly those same issues. Now, I've always found it very hard to address those issues, you know, in counseling or whatever other processes I went through. But when I address them in my land, they automatically get attention without too much pain. Does that make sense? And as the land becomes healed, gets better, I get better. And it's a really wonderful way of working. So by healing the piece of land you're working with, you find you're actually doing the work on yourself as well. So it's a wonderful kind of mirror image, and I don't understand it, but it seems to work.
Yeah, I'm reminded of reading something once about the mental health system in Cuba, where obviously they're denied, because of the embargo and so on, they're denied many of the kind of Western or psychiatric interventions, particularly pharmaceutical. But so they've had to kind of innovate, let's say, by needs must. And I can't even remember where I read this, but it was basically about herbalism and getting people in mental health care facilities to grow herbs. But what you're talking about almost takes it to the whole next level. If you could get people out growing all sorts and growing food, and it becomes this kind of virtuous cycle that everybody's winning. All of society, all of humanity, all of ecology is winning.
Yeah, it's very simple stuff. And all of the myths and legends told us, warned us that we needed to hold this balance in place in order for us to stay well and for the land to stay well. So we know what we need to do, and we just need to start sharing the planet with all the other creatures that we're hopelessly dependent upon, and support the land and those creatures to be well, so that we can stay here. That's all. I want to keep living here. I'd like my kids to keep living here, you know, on this planet. Very simple stuff. So we can't do that with the levels of greed and stupidity. And, you know, it's just, there's just too much imbalance in the world. There's too many people starving every day. There's too many people eating way too much of bad, poisoned food. It's just all wrong. So you get overwhelmed when you see all that. So what can one person do? So I've come to the conclusion that a lot of us, the lucky ones, have some land to look after, and there are patches of this earth, you know. And if we restore the health to them, not only to those patches of earth, we're creating a patchwork quilt that we can wrap around the globe. You know, we can, and it only takes 3% of a population, like the number pi d4, to shift a percentage of a population. It only takes that amount before everything shifts. So we don't need to change too many people's minds before the whole thing steps up a notch. So it is all possible. It's just a difficult moment in time because we're on that precipice. It could go either way, you know. And so we talked earlier about you know, books and, you know, promoting books a little bit and things like that, when you know, neither of us are very good at doing that and don't necessarily like doing that. But it's a bit like that with We Are the Ark or whatever, and me trying to help people understand what benefits they will get from giving their land back to nature, and that will spread. And then the more people that do it, if we can just hit that 3%, we can make a difference, you know.
Mary, I kind of feel like that you know, those that have the levers of power in the form of policy and legislation and money and so on, quite often they're very quick to dismiss this type of thinking or this idea or worldview, that they can dismiss people easily and say, well, you're obviously kind of not in the so-called real world, you know. But you are somebody that was very much in the real world, and like when it comes to notions of success, you know, because quite often that becomes the judgment or the benchmark for whether somebody's taken seriously or not, that you did achieve a degree of success, that you had access to a lot of that worldview's opportunity in the form of money and profile and whatever else might come with it. What was the kind of evolution there? What kind of currents started to come into play where you started to feel out of sync there?
Well, I think it was kind of a weird process. Like I was the first person from Ireland to win the gold medal at the Chelsea Flower Show for designing gardens a long time ago in 2002. And I went there because I knew there was something wrong with the way I was designing gardens, for example. And so I I wanted to make a garden full of wild plants. So I ended up in the Chelsea Flower Show because none of my clients would let me do it. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to do it somewhere. So I did it there. So I entered a world of kind of rich people and, you know, traveling the world, doing gardens and all that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, it was, you know, it didn't really suit me. So I don't know how you put that. It's a very Irish thing to say, isn't it? It didn't suit me really.
Well,
I think
it was almost like a different suit of clothes that you were wearing. They weren't your clothes.
Yeah. And you know, I think I got a few notions about myself as well.
Did you? Yeah.
I
what
think
way?
so.
Like,
well, I think I noticed sometimes that I would, you know, stupid things really, but just I noticed that I had a sense of entitlement sometimes, which was not real, and so I didn't like it. And then I didn't like being that person, you know. And you know, I grew up on a farm, and you know, you're not allowed to have notions about yourself. So I managed. Anyway, then luckily I didn't have to figure my way out of it because my life fell apart, and that was kind of the end of all that. And I ended up living in the wilds of West Kerry with 2 babies on my own, and I kind of chose to stay there and let everything fall apart. And then I had to rebuild the way I look at things then, you know. And you know, it's kind of good when you disappear as well, because people forget about you and they forget you can rebuild yourself again. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. Yeah. But I was struck by just you saying that you allowed it to fall apart. You didn't sort of resist, which could have created all sorts of additional suffering.
Yeah, I think I'd created enough of that as it was.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, yeah, no, I had enough of that done. And then somebody decided to make a movie about my life, and you know, that was strange in itself. Didn't think it'd ever happen, but they did, and it's kind of like, you know, very light and very sweet story about a certain part of my life. And while they were making that, I decided I should write another book about the real story as such, you know, kind of my own version of it, if that makes sense. And even though it's quite real in lots of ways, but I wrote myself out of a job completely because I got bored writing about my own story. So I started writing about my work, and I totally wrote myself out of a job, and realized that all these gardens that I'm doing, even if they look wild and they look natural, it's not how they wanted to stay. So I was still controlling the land. So I had to try and figure out how do I actually still make a living and allow the land to become what it wants to become. So that was kind of halfway there, if that makes sense. I was working my way along the line of finding my way to what I do now, which is asking people to just let go of it altogether, you know, to set it free. That's where I am now.
I love that. Was there anything here in this that was? Do you think there was something going on with West Kerry?
Was there anything? West Kerry is. I mean, okay. So there was something going on in West Kerry. West Kerry, the landscape in different places reflects different things, you know. And West Kerry landscape is bare and it's raw, and you go there and you get stripped raw, basically. If you move there, if you're born there, it's a totally different thing. But if you move there, it's like people move from different places in order to experience what it is that they need to experience. So so there was a rawness about it. I was stripped bare and I had to rebuild myself. And luckily I got out of it, because I wouldn't have ever, I kind of feel like I would never have really moved on if I hadn't left the place. Does that make sense? Even though I really miss the wildness. I totally, I miss some of my really dear friends. But no, I think West Kerry had a lot to do with it. Yeah.
You mentioned making a living there. I mean, there's different ways of looking at the notion of work and income and economics and all of that. Um, was was that was that a struggle to kind of say goodbye to one way that was going to potentially provide well, even to another way that may not have, or how was that danced?
Yeah. Um, well, um, I never really thought about money much, to be honest, and so it was never a driving force. It was more about being um, true to myself. I mean, I charge really well for the work that I do, which I don't now, obviously, but I didn't have to work very often, you know, and then I do a lot of stuff for free as well, you know. But I just followed my heart generally as much as I could, and so it wasn't a driving force. I always tend to be looked after. I have no idea why, because I don't do that much work, you know, but we always have enough money. And it's only me. I don't have any help or anything. It's just me. and, and I've always managed. And I find it quite miraculous, really, because I don't try, you know, but I've always been looked after. So I always feel a bit lucky and blessed for some reason that I have been.
Yeah. Do you feel like opportunities and things come your way? I mean, I've just found this in my own life that if you start to kind of look at things way beyond money as one currency and see that there are many forms of currency, then the gifts ultimately come. They don't necessarily come as you expect them.
Yeah, that does work like that. But that's what, going back to what we said earlier, that's what you believe. And that's what I believe. And so that's what happens. It's that
Mm.
simple,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. It's not you're not setting yourself up for it to happen if you can't even imagine that it could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good. But you know, I mean, I'm sure you're the same. There's times when you'd wonder how you're going to get to pay the rent at the end of the month, or how, you know, and I do look at, you know, I sit down and I think, okay, I have to be responsible. You know, I have 2 kids. How am I going to do this? And I do think about going into town and getting a job and waitressing or something. And, you know, I would if I had to, but for some reason I've never had to. It's always worked out just before I've gone into town.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And does that tend to happen you like once a year sort of thing or twice a year?
I'd say once a month.
Oh, geez. Right. And
No, sorry, that's a total exaggeration.
yeah,
I'd say probably once a year is probably about right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Because I mean, like if you take the inverse situation or the reverse, would be that somebody else might feel like quitting the job that they actually have once a month or once a year. So it's all a jigs and reels, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And tell me what's it like? You mentioned building your house. What's involved in that, and what sort of shape is it taking now?
Well, being a self-employed single parent, there is no hope in hell of any kind of a loan. So it's it's a slow process. Um, there's it's constantly me trying to figure out how to do it, you know. And so I swing between um, getting a friend of mine, Geraldine, to help me build it with cob, and to just build my own house with the earth that's in the field, because we have marl, you know, that really sticky clay. So I could do that, but then I kind of think, oh, I don't know if I could take it on, you know, I don't know if I can do this, and then I let more time pass, and then I think, okay, I'll do a wooden house, or I'll do some other kind of a house, and then let more time pass, and I don't know. It's just time is passing, and my children will be gone before I
Yeah,
get there. You know,
yeah,
that's what I worry about. Is that they'll be gone before I get there, and then sure, you know, I don't necessarily like. I mean, I've given most of that 5 acres back to nature, so I don't need to be there much, you know. So I could go wander instead or something.
Yeah. Tell me about the
Okay,
arc in general. Yeah.
okay. Well, let's see. I was well, I could tell you the story where the ark came from.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was sitting in this house, looking out my window at my desk. I was at my desk looking at my window, and it was not this winter gone, but the one before. And a fox ran past. It was morning time, kids had gone to school. And just after the fox, a couple of hares chasing the fox, which was unusual. And
Wow.
then I
All
looked
going
up a
down
little,
in Wexford.
and I looked up a little while later, and what I remember to be a family of hedgehogs, I'm sure it was probably just one because I exaggerate things in my mind, ran along the hedge in the same direction. So they're supposed to be nocturnal and hibernating. So I thought, right, there's something going on. So I went outside and I walked up to the end of my lane and across or down to the end of my lane. I live on a country road. And at the end of the lane, across the road, there had been this really, really dense thicket of a field, which had been filled with gorse and bracken and hawthorn and blackthorn and wild plants. It was completely impenetrable. It was a real, safe zone for wild creatures. And somebody had got planning permission at the top of the field, and they'd gone in and done what everybody does, and they'd cleared the whole place out in a matter of minutes with a digger. And all of those creatures that called it home had been forced to go and find somewhere else safe. And we do this, and I had done it so many times myself. And I just thought, what is wrong with us? We're putting in these stupid gardens, and we're taking away the homes of all the creatures that we're hopelessly dependent upon. We're just not joining the dots. And so that was the end of my career at that moment. And it just reminded me of Noah's Ark, and so I didn't want people to think it was religious, so I called it We Are the Ark, so that everybody felt part of it. And it stands for Acts of Restorative Kindness to the Earth. And between myself and Clara Ledbetter and Joe Doyle and Ruth Evans and Jen Halter-Prendid, we put together a website. I wrote it up. I was going to make another book, might still, but I wanted to do it quickly because I don't think we have much time. And I launched it as We Are the Ark, and I asked people to put up signs in their gardens, homemade signs saying this is an ark, with the website wearetheark.org underneath. And even if they only have a windowsill full of weeds, which is what we want, then to do that. And if they can give back half of their garden to nature, they could even let the rest they still want it to be. But very, very quickly, I know that they'll give the rest back, because they'll see the difference between the amount of life in that wild half and the dead garden half, which they will see is actually pointless and unfair and a lost opportunity. So that's it. That's what the ARC thing, and spread all over the world. It's very cool. It's now a global movement. It's kind of I don't know how many ARCs people keep telling me about them all over the place. Some people put them on a map, which we have on the website, but most people don't want to, because they one of the things we ask people to do is to grow their own food as well, so they think about food security. So there's arcs as big as 1,500 acres down to tiny window boxes, and it's all freely given. It's all still in there. Like, we're not asking to hold it as a trust or anything. It's just gives people things to do with land that they didn't know they could. Like, even though we have land, go, what will I do with that? Or I lease it out to someone, or will I start growing a few spuds on it, or will I plant some trees? But now you can rewild it and give it back to nature and put up a sign, and it gives it a purpose, and that's enough.
That's beautiful. So do you want to remind us the actual website name? We Are the Ark.
Sure.
It's .com, is it?
.org.
.org.
Yeah.
wearetheark.org. And Mary, just want to we'll wrap it up shortly, but I want to get a sense of we started off, and you started saying that nature had collapsed in Ireland, and part of me just kind of wanted to kind of curl up when you sort of hear that. It's so overwhelming to hear statements like that. But immediately I could sense that you're someone that is hopeful, you know. And so in this kind of great turning point that we're at, the precipice and the opportunity, where are you seeing those signs of hope beyond the arc and in the meta kind of political social environment? Like, ultimately, can we do it?
Yeah, I think I see signs of hope in all the people who are waking up to the truth of our existence and the lies that we've been living. I see hope in how quickly nature recovers if we just let her be and support her in any way we can. I see all these incredible kind of networks of people springing up all over the world, like ecosystem restoration camps, like Extinction Rebellion, like Trees for Life in Scotland, or you know, the Woodland League. There's so many people that are coming out of the cracks and are starting to think, how can we be of help to this planet? Because, you know, there isn't a planet B, and this is it. This is it. This is our last chance. We have 5 to 10 years, and it would not take that much to get it to turn around. It just and the magic happens when you heal your own little piece of this planet, and you see how quickly it happens. Then you go out and you look at all these dead zones that the county council might have, or your local government in whatever parts of the world you're in, and they keep them all neat and tidy. Or the universities have all these, you know, pretty plants or pretty swathes of grasses, and you know, you suddenly look at them and go, why is that there? Why are we doing that? We should be giving any land we can back to nature, not holding it in some pretty concept for ourselves. We've done enough, you know. We can, and I suppose that's where the hope is, that how quickly everything recovers, and it's and the fact that it only takes 3% of us to bounce it all into a higher level of consciousness, and to restore our inner wildness, our outer wildness, our purpose, you know, and that being of service to nature, to other people, to ourselves, is actually will help with people's mental health issues, their physical health issues. A sense of community is restored. Community outside of people, you know, community of plants and animals and creatures. There's our community of earth, you know. We're just a multi-dimensional mixture of creatures, and our only role here is to look after the rest of them. So when you remember that and you really understand it and you bring it deep into your soul, everything makes sense, you know. Everything makes sense, and nothing makes sense in the system that we're living in. But it's so simple, and life can be so good and simple again if we remember that and just walk back towards that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mary. Thanks for the chat and the inspiration and the reminders. And yeah, look forward to sharing this now with the rest of the world so that we can continue on spreading the light.
Thanks, Rory. It's lovely to talk to you. Take care.
Thank you.